Okay, good to see you diehards. We may have a few more coming in. This is our illumination class. We're going to begin with a couple of prayers. Snehi, if you'd like to put them up, maybe in a week or two, we can dispense with that once people have memorized these. Sangye churang soki chognam la changchu baru dagni kepsuchi dagi chunen gipe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupa sho sangye churang soki chognam la changchu baru dagni kepsuchi dagi chunen gipe sognam ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Shog. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Or you could say, I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha and Supreme Assembly until I'm enlightened. We can't, it's the Mahayana refuge. Usual refuge is just this life. Through the collections of merit and wisdom that I create through listening to the Dharma today, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sashi Boki Chukshing Meto Tramri Rablingji Nide Genpadi Sangye Shindu Mikte Uargi Trokunam Dakshin La Chupasho. I can hear in my mind Laktor translating that into English as they recite it during the Dalai Lama's teachings. Recently, the Dalai Lama just appeared after being sick for a couple of days and gave a Chenrezi empowerment, which I didn't stay to participate in because I'd eaten some meat that day. Usually, Avalokiteshvara is Kriya Tantra and requires that you be vegetarian that day. But after the long mandala, they say this Sashipoke as we just did, and as they're saying that, I can hear Laktor translating the exact words that we usually use. Then, still while holding the mandala, imagining offering it as a Dharma wheel to the omniscient mind, requesting blessings to send down a rain of Dharma. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, the method side and the wisdom side, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Or we could say it precisely in accordance with those that need to be subdued, dulwa, trained, and so forth. So we will just spend a couple of minutes meditating. Sit comfortably. Hello, Jennifer and Ida are here joining us. Spine erect. I'm reminding myself that when I take my blood pressure, I have to be taking my blood pressure several times a day. The instructions, you have to have your feet on the floor and your spine straight. So spine straight, head slightly tilted forward. I notice myself when I begin the meditation, if my face is more directly forward, my thoughts kind of scatter. If it's too low, your mind sinks. So you want to find something where your chin is slightly pulled in, eyes slightly open. Watch your respiration, just recognize it. Once it's recognized, hold it with mindfulness to the exclusion of everything else, simply recognizing when you're breathing in as opposed to out, and when there is a long breath as opposed to a short breath. try to curb your ambitious mind that may be multitasking while you're watching the breath, still thinking of something else in the background. Devote all of that energy instead into just being mindful of the breathing. If your mind is slightly calmed, bring your attention, take your attention away from the respiration and place it on your mental consciousness, particularly at first the contents, trying to recognize the contents of your mental consciousnesses having emerged from the clear light nature of your mind, conventional clear light nature. And then focusing just on that alone, letting the other contents, the thoughts, the emotions, and so forth fade as you restrain your attention to them. You subdue your attention to them. You divert your attention away from the thoughts and emotions to that substratum, clear light, conventional nature of the mind, in which they are present, from which they emerge, into which they dissolve. You have to be alert when thoughts arise. Immediately try to recognize that there is a disturbance of that apprehension of the clarity, and just use logic, for instance, that the fact that these thoughts are there, these appearances to the mind, is due to the fact that the mind has this lack of obstruction to the emergence of thoughts. This is what the Buddha called clear light, what the Dalai Lama refers to as the conventional clear light nature of the mind. which should give us great joy in seeing that we can develop all the good qualities. The fact that we can recognize this and feel this, good state of mind, happy state of mind, blissful state of mind, which is very good to associate with this clarity, leaving an imprint for Tantra later, for the union of the innate clear light mind, the ultimate clear light nature of mind combined with bliss. We have this opportunity because we have this auspicious moment, the Buddha said, of leisure and endowment. Just an instant in the span of numberless lives. Usually we're floundering around in the lower realms as animals, hungry ghosts, hell being experience, probably most of the time in the hells. Once in a while, because of some karma that we've created, like a blind turtle rising to the surface of the ocean to get a gulp of air once every 100 years, just for 1 second, and going down again. That's how infrequent an auspicious moment like this is. We can use it, we can squander it on the 8 worldly concerns, the 8 worldly dharmas, wanting to have pleasure of the senses primarily, power, love, possessions, and so forth. Squander because all of our good karma would be used up, and we wouldn't be creating very much virtuous karma. Or we can try to have a mind that sees beyond the present, the appearances of this life, wants to achieve a higher goal, not simply by dint of simply having a moral mind, practicing charity and so forth, but by undercutting the bonds, the chains that bind us to cyclic existence, by realizing emptiness, finding our own liberation, or with empathy and compassion, seeing the plight of all other sentient beings. And having heard the Buddha's admonition not to follow, if we have intelligence, not to follow his Hinayana, his lesser vehicle, but to strive for the Mahayana, his great vehicle, the vehicle of striving for Buddhahood, through which we can bring all sentient beings in our big vehicle to the great destination, the Mahayana, Maha, great in those ways that includes all beings. There's always room, as the Italians say, there's always room for another one at the table. And taking them to the great destination of enlightenment. Why? Because all living beings have been depthlessly kind to us, as in the 7-point mind training we hear again and again. Remember the kindness of all. Recognize the shortcomings of cherishing oneself. Put all faults on that self-cherishing mind. If we want to achieve that goal of enlightenment, in order to do that, we need to know how to practice in theory and meditational instruction. You say practice. To do that, we need to study the great treatises, the Buddha's words themselves, and the great commentaries by those practitioners so close in time to the Buddha that his actual intention was still well understood, such as Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, Kamalashila, and so forth. I'm going to listen today to Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on those, his illumination of the intent, for the purpose of learning how to accumulate the two collections, merit and wisdom, with an aim to achieve enlightenment for the welfare of sentient beings. I'm going to listen in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all living beings. And then bring your attention back to the present. Good to see you. How are we doing? Anyone have any questions about the meditation or something from previous class? I think Snehi, you said, or you do you want to wait? Snehi, did you say you had something?
Oh, I'll wait till we get to the.
Okay, we'll get to that one. Okay. Anyone have something? Oh, Mikhail. Okay, good.
Yeah, it's about the note number 316 in Tungten Jinpa's book.
Okay.
He's talking about the patience toward the unborn nature.
Okay, so this note 316 is referring to this paragraph. He says, quote, sharp, unquote, refers to swift intelligence, because there was a talking about those who have sharp abilities. Sharp refers to swift or quick wisdom, swift intelligence, while opposite or opposite, what did I say? And
concordant, I think she says.
Concordant, right?
Yeah.
Sharp refers to, Klein said, sharp refers to quick wisdom. Concordant, that Jimpa is calling opposite, means concordant with an eighth ground bodhisattva's forbearance or patience with respect to the doctrine of non-production. Okay, so that's the context. And your question is what, Mika?
Yeah, this note. I understood that this patience regarding unborn nature is pointing to pure ground bodhisattvas. Right. They have that kind of patience.
Okay, yeah. The note says Mikewe Chila Soba. So soba is usually what we call translate. What's he calling? Forbearance or whatever. Forbearance toward the unborn nature refers to a state of mind one attains on a path that is free of any fear or apprehension with respect to emptiness, the unborn nature. The first stage of such forbearance is attained on the third level. I think that means third ground, right? Forbearance. No. The first stage of such forbearance is attained on the third level. Third level forbearance of the path of preparation. So in the path of preparation, we say heat, peak, patience, highest mundane dharma. Those are the four levels of the path of preparation. So on the third of those levels of the path of preparation, it's called patience. One has the first kind of forbearance or patience toward the unborn nature. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, while the highest is attained on the eighth ground. So in one sense, that means when you're talking about patience in this regard, it means the state of mind that does not develop agitation or fear or frustration when studying the Dharma, especially when trying to understand the unborn nature, which is another way of saying, indirectly, emptiness. When you're trying to understand emptiness, that phenomena are not inherently born. They're not born inherently. Unborn nature. That can be difficult to understand and to meditate on and so forth. So there's a certain amount of mental, I want to say fortitude, but that sounds more like enthusiasm, right? Certain amount of strength of mind, that being patient with that. When you're working on something that, like on your taxes or something like that, they're getting very complicated. Of course, you need to have perseverance, or when you're studying the text, but also you need to have a certain amount of a state of mind that doesn't allow yourself to get agitated when going through the details. So I think that's what's being referred to. So, Mikhail, do you have a particular question about that?
Yeah, in my mind, it was quite specific to bodhisattvas on the 8th ground and above. But Thupten Jinpa is saying that it starts on the path of preparation.
Yeah. We have, let's say, for instance, on the first ground also, and the second ground and so forth, and maybe even on the third ground, where you have a special practice of the perfection of patience, there's an increasing ability to be able to, what does he say? What's the word he used here? Forbearance toward the unborn nature. That you have this ability to not find it frightening and forbidding, and that you are able to be patient with it. It's not as though it only occurs on the 8th ground. On the 8th ground, what's special about that, Mikhail?
They are Buddhas bodhisattvas are free from samsara.
Right. They have no longer any grasping at all at inherent existence. So they are not, at that point, they have a very special kind of patience to be able to understand emptiness or the unborn nature. I think that's the point. It's kind of like a gradation. There may be special stages on the patience level of the path of preparation. I think also it may have been alluded to during the third bhumi, when we talked about the third bhumi, when there's a special practice of the perfection of patience, that there's a special patience there, but it's kind of like a continuum.
And it's perfected on the 8th ground.
Yeah, well, and above, yeah.
And above, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to begin with a little motivation again, as I've done since we started this section. Geshe Zopa, when he was teaching us in July 2001, 22 years ago. Is that right, Paul? Would I put the number down right? Paul was there for some of these, I think. I'm not sure if you were there that year in your Volkswagen van, right? I remember you in the Deer Park.
I think I was there for Lekshe Ningpo a couple of years earlier.
Lekshe Ningpo came after. But you were here. You were there for some of the first Geshe, after teaching Lanrim Chemo, Geshe first taught the Gompa Rapsel, and then he taught the Lekshe Ningpo, and then he taught a little bit of the Rikpe Gyatso, these three great texts on emptiness. Anyway, at that point, on the 5th of July in 2001, Geshe quoted from the three principal aspects of the path. If you don't have a copy, this is a very good commentary by Geshe Sonam Rinchen, translated by Ruth Sonam. I don't know if the cover still looks the same. It was in the Snow Lion section. This is verse 10. And I will, Geshe, of course, said it in Tibetan. Kangshik Korde Chunam Tamchegi Gyude Namyang Lua Metong Shing Mikme Teso Kangyen Kunshikpa Deni Sange Gepe Lamla Shuk. So basically, let me read what Jimpa has translated that in one of the texts by the Dalai Lama, when the Dalai Lama taught that. One who sees the infallible cause and effect of all phenomena in cyclic existence and beyond, and who destroys all perceptions of inherent existence, has entered the path that pleases the Buddha. That's the general sense. He's paraphrased a lot of things here. The FPMT official translation says, one who sees cause and effect of all phenomena of both cyclic existence and the state beyond sorrow as forever unbetraying, and for whom any object trusted in by the grasping mind has completely disappeared, has at that time entered the path pleasing the Buddhas. That's about twice as long. It's not any clearer. Ruth Sonam translated, whoever sees that the causes and effects of all phenomena and cyclic existence and beyond are unfailing. Jibba said infallible. FBMT said unbetraying. She says unfailing. Lua Meba. Whoever sees that the causes and effects of all phenomena in cyclic existence and beyond are unfailing. So that's understanding that there's no getting around the law of cause and effect if you've created the causes, unless those causes, karmic seeds in your consciousness are destroyed, they will unfailingly bring their appropriate results. Virtuous actions will bring pleasant results. Negative actions, harmful actions will bring suffering results. Whoever sees that and who thoroughly destroys the mainstay of misconceptions. This is the tricky word in here. We say the teso, mikpe teso. Teso means, te can mean something that you have confidence in. So mikpe teso means that the thing that we've always relied on, or she translates the mainstay of misconceptions. That's the thing that you've always believed in. What is that? That's the appearance of inherent existence and the grasping to it, right? Those are the mainstays of our misconceptions. The fact that they're appearing as inherently existent, and the fact that we're grasping to them. Whoever does that walks on the path that pleases the Buddhas. So I'll just read a little bit of what Geshe said at the time. It's obviously very relevant to where we're talking about right now, right? We're talking about identifying the object of negation. Anybody who sees all dharmas which belong to samsara, in Tibetan this is kangshik, that means anyone. Korde, korwa means samsara, de means past, right? So korde is actually referring to two different things: being in korwa, being in samsara, and or having passed beyond samsara, we call, or transcended samsara, depa, that would mean nirvana. So anyone who sees all dharmas which belong to samsaric causality, or towards the causality of nirvana, because nirvana comes about because of causes and effects also. All of these causalities, cause and effects, there are good and bad causes and effects, seeing that all those never deceive, That is to say, that means it is no good to understand emptiness to mean that there is nothing there. That's a misconception to think, I don't have to practice the law of cause and effect. The negative actions I create, kind of in the back of my mind, I know I'm creating, thinking, oh, because they're empty, that they won't have any effect, or if I realize emptiness, they won't have any effect. That's foolish. One shouldn't think to understand empty means that there's nothing there, to be deceived about all this causality and true nature. So therefore, properly being able to realize cause and effect and whatever is explained about those, never deceiving means everything is effective. Nothing deceives. So when we say that the law of cause and effect is never deceiving or is infallible, for me, that resonates more with my mind. I say infallible. There's never a situation where a virtuous action that we've done will result in our future suffering. Maybe it seems that way in the world, right? You do something good, and then the person misunderstands what you did, and they get angry with you. You try to you know what I'm saying? In the actual world thing, that's not the result of your karma that's coming back. That's the results of some other karma that you created to be abused by that person. Your virtuous deed in helping them or saying something kind to them or giving them something that will infallibly bring about a happy result in the future. Mikbe teso kangin kunshikba. Mikbe teso, Geshe-la said, if something is something we always have, when you see anything, the self, the subject, the object, whatever you see, there is always negative ignorance that holds those as inherently existent. The mikba, the referent object, let's say, refers to all objects, and the focal point, teso, means there is a sense that everything has a ground or base of inherent nature, that there is something real here. So when it's said that this is sort of the basis for the grasping mind, even you accept cause and effect, this is true, this is not true, but the mikbe teso means still with that, because of that appearance of inherent existence and the grasping to it, because of the trueness, basically fundamentally inherently there. If it were not there, one thinks we would not be able to understand cause and effect. All phenomena are not to be able to be realized. Anyway, I won't elaborate more. If you want to read some commentary about that, if you happen to have that book, or if you want to get it, it's on commentary of that. Verse 10 is on page 113. Okay. How are we doing? Make sense? Okay. So just as a little connection to what we were talking about before, when we had some quotations from the Sutra Samuccaya that was composed by Nagarjuna. I'm going to say composed by. He has some of his own prose in it, but much of it is quotations from Mahayana sutras, Sutra Samuccaya, sort of compendium of sutra passages. There was one that was alluded to in Lama Tsong Khapa just by mentioning a word or two, and I wanted to read to you a longer part of it. So this is, this says, Kashapya, all these tenfold karmically unwholesome paths of action. Remember, Kashapya was one of the Buddha's disciples, right? You remember what he was foremost in? Does anyone remember?
in samadhi or in his meditative
Kashyapya?
Kashyapa
I think
was
so.
a-
Wasn't Kashyapya the foremost in ascetic practices?
oh, that's right. I'm thinking of Maudgalyayana, who was the
Gandhyana, and psychic powers. And so Kashyapya was very close to the Buddha. The Kashyapya was, I believe, the monk that the Buddha gave his first robe to, the one that he had when he was, after 12 years of ascetic practice, some lady who was taking a corpse of her, what did I say? Her owner, not her owner, her she was a worker in the house. She was taking the corpse of the woman to the charnel ground in this shroud that was very coarse. And when she saw the Buddha, she gave it to him. This was when he was still called Siddhartha, before he sat underneath the Bodhi tree. And it was very, although it was very uncomfortable, it was something that was not difficult for him to endure. So Kashyapya received that. Kashyapya, all these tenfold karmically unwholesome paths of action are associated with great misdeeds. We say kanamatawa, sort of, the negativities. So anyone, Kashyapya, if a person should be involved in such great misdeeds, in these 10 kinds of karmically unwholesome actions, but if entering the Tathagata's Dharma teaching involved with causes and conditions, if that person says there is not any, which say, those teachings that say there is not any self, there's not any sentient being, not any living being, any person at all who is the agent or the experiencer regarding us. So from the Buddhist teachings about emptiness and so forth, about dependent origination, there's not an inherently existent person who created these actions, was the agent of them. When you're meditating on, when you're doing confession, that's one of the things that's important to know, to realizing what you've created in the past, or you must have created, even if you don't remember it, but that at that point, there was never an inherently existent agent, person creating the actions. And later, when you're experiencing the results, there was never an inherently existent experiencer of the results, right now. Any person who, but entering the Tathagata's Dharma teachings involved in causes and conditions says that there is not any self, any sentient being, any living being, any person at all who is an agent or experiencer regarding those. They enter such phenomena which are uncreated, and entering in the understanding of emptiness, uncreated, totally uncompounded, illusory in nature, unafflicted, naturally luminous, and with total faith and appreciation that all phenomena are pure from the beginning. I do not say that sentient being will go to bad migration. Do you remember some portion of this before? I do. So I think it was misquoted by one of the authors. It said, I say they will not go. It's actually, the Buddha said, I do not say they will go to bad migrations, leaving open the possibility that they didn't have enough faith. But if you have faith and confidence in this nature of the mind, both in the conventional clear light nature of the mind and the ultimate clear light nature of the mind, when thinking of the deeds that you've created, negative actions that you've created, or fearing that you may experience negative results in the future from things that you've done, being the experiencer of those results, if you have faith that there was never an inherently existent person, even if you don't realize it yet, if you have faith that there will never be an inherently existent experiencer of that, it's very difficult for the Buddha to prophesize that you will go to the lower realms. In other words, that karma becomes much lightened, purified by that. So I find that very reassuring, even though we don't realize emptiness to a great degree now. Maybe we're beginning to get some insight into it. Merely having faith in it and confidence in it, in that clear light nature, can be something that can protect us from being reborn in the lower realms. Make sense? Okay. Yeah, Jennifer, what do you think?
Thank you so much, Venerable George. I'm just trying to understand that a bit more. Let's say we practice the four opponent powers and then meditate on emptiness. What is the mechanism that actually makes that karma lighter, especially if, emptiness is, correlated with dependent arising and it doesn't take away the power of karma? I'm just trying to, understand
Right.
that mechanism.
Right. So, say for instance, if you've created an action, whether it be virtuous or non-virtuous, and you rejoice in that, do you know what the effect of your rejoicing in that action will do?
It makes it stronger from
Yeah.
a karmic perspective.
Yeah, you can kind of see that, right? If you think, oh yeah, I got him. You hurt someone, and that's bad enough. Instead of regretting it later, you think, got them. They got what they deserved, or something. That just intensifies. It's interesting to see those of you who are smiling, or those who can associate with that, or. So that intensifies the karma of that. That is itself an action. Whereas if you do an action of regret, which is one of the four opponent forces, right? That has the opposite effect. That causes the karmic potency of that action, which it already created, to be diminished. That's one of the four opponent forces. That itself won't eliminate it in its entirety. But that can, I think that's of the four opponent forces, each of them has a special power to diminish one of the four karmic effects, right? I'm not sure. I think regret is mainly, I'm not sure. Any of you remember? I think it may be mainly for the maturation result, to diminishing that. Taking refuge in generating bodhicitta has effect of diminishing the negative karmic results. Vowing, making a strong vow, you could say, not to do it again in the future. That can help to cut off the effects similar to the action, similar to the cause as an action, the habitual result. Making a very strong determination. I will not do that kind of thing again. I will not kill again. I will not steal again. I will not lie again. If one can keep that continuity of mind for some time, it makes, I think, quite easily understood that can start to diminish the strength of that karma in your mind, the effect of doing an action again in the future, right? The habitual result. So also meditating on emptiness itself, especially with regard to the actor, the agent of the action, When I created that action that I feel so aggrieved about, how could I have done that? When I was a kid, or now, whenever I did something really that I feel ashamed about, at that point, I may have gone into that action and done it feeling that there was a real I doing it, a real agent. You know what I mean by agent here means the individual, or the instrument which creates the action. In this case, the person. There was never, even at that point when I thought there was not an inherently existent agent that created it. That was a misconception. That in itself also can help to diminish the karmic potency of that karmic seed on our consciousness. So if you apply all the opponent forces again and again, it can get to the point where the karmic seed has no longer the ability to bring any of the four effects. That's the point of doing the four opponent forces. Especially, for instance, if you do the Vajrasattva meditation every day. It's said that if you do 100,000 recitations of the Vajrasattva mantra, anyone here done 100,000? One. Nadine, you've done 100,000? You put up and then you went like this.
Yes, but not in a retreat.
Okay,
Only
yeah.
in daily life.
Yeah, right. So it's said that if you were to do 100,000 recitations of Vajrasattva with a visualization and so forth, with good concentration, that can also purify all of the negative karma, especially even breaking the tantric vows, which are extremely heavy and so forth. That's one of the reasons that people do every day 21 recitations of Vajrasattva, because when we create negative karma, if we don't attend to them, if we don't feel regret about them, they will multiply in every day. They will get stronger and stronger. I think that the effect, what is it? The effect of, someone help me here. I think the effect of killing an ant, not your ant, but an ant, an insect, if unpurified for something like 14 days, is that the strength of that karma will have increased to having been the same as having murdered a human being. So that's why individuals who are serious Dharma practitioners try to do 21 recitations of Vajrasattva every day to keep the karmas that we create day by day down, keep them from multiplying till the point where we can actually apply the four opponent forces in great detail and strength. Okay, so does that help, Jennifer? Something, food for thought, right?
Yes, thank you. I think I will still need to meditate on the why, in addition to the four opponent powers, the emptiness lightens that karmic imprint.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, when you recognize that there was no agent and no experiencer of that result, let's say even the action that you create, say let's say you killed, you went hunting, you went fishing as a kid or something like that. So you the agent, and talking about the experiencer, also talking about the experiencer of your action at that time. That is the deer or the fish. There was no inherently existent animal that you killed. Hopefully not a human. Who knows? That in itself can cause that karmic seed on your mind stream that got its validity through this misconception that can cause that to diminish. So we'll talk about this more as time goes on. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So let's continue on in the text. How are we doing? Are we okay? Richard, are you okay? Okay. So we're on Jimpa's page 173 and in Anne Klein's book 165. If you have the electronic edition of Jimpa's book, it's the section called Identifying the Forces opposing the understanding of suchness, or as Anne Klein translates, identifying what is discordant with knowing suchness. So Jennifer had to go. Okay. So at least she got her question in before she, okay, good. Identifying what is discordant with knowing suchness. So suchness is another synonym for emptiness, right? Can I say that's a synonym? Yeah, because emptiness does exist, right? Emptiness is a phenomenon. I can't say, for instance, if I talk about inherent existence, there are various things that are hypothetical synonyms of inherent existence. They're called hypothetical synonyms because inherent existence does not exist. So for two things to be synonyms, they have to both exist. So, but when we talk about suchness, emptiness, dharma, dhatu, and so forth, they're all synonyms of emptiness. Someone was going to say something, but I missed it. Okay. So Jinpa's translation of Lama Tsongkhapa starts, in setting forth all phenomena as devoid of true existence. In other words, in setting forth emptiness of all phenomena, if one does not understand well what constitutes true existence, if you don't know what that means, what would it mean to be truly existent? When I say what would it mean, that's because true existence doesn't exist. So you have to use what kind of grammatical construction is that? Is if it did exist, Paul, do you know?
The subjunctive.
The subjunctive, thank you. Those of you who are grammarians, in setting forth all phenomena as devoid of true existence, if one does not understand well Jinpa says, what constitutes true existence, I think you should say what would constitute, or as Anne Klein says, with regard to setting the absence of true existence in phenomena, if you do not understand well just what true establishment is, I would say also you should say what true establishment or true existence would be, because there isn't something what it is. If one does not understand well what constitutes true existence and what constitutes grasping at true existence, now that grasping does exist, right? The true existence that it's believing in and grasping at does not exist, but the grasping itself does exist. If you don't understand well what these are, one's view of emptiness will certainly go astray. Okay, so this is very important. Now, so there's a quotation from the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. It's a famous verse 140 in the Sanskrit edition. In Tibetan, it's verse 139. Somehow, there are a couple of verses different in the Sanskrit. Maybe those who've studied it, you know that there's a numbering difference at certain points. There are some Sanskrit verses that existed that were not in the Tibetan, and sometimes there's a Tibetan verse that's not in the Sanskrit. So this, in the Tibetan, this is Takpe Ngola Marek Par Dei Ngome Zinmayin. Those of you who've studied Tibetan a little bit, Jinpa translates that without touching upon the imputed entity, without touching upon the imputed entity, the absence of its reality cannot be grasped. Or as Anne says, without making contact with the thing imputed, the non-existence of that thing is not apprehended. What is this talking about? So when we're talking about the mind, that's understanding, believing things to be inherently existent. Is that kind of consciousness found in the I consciousness? Diana? Weddington? Oh no, you said not to this, but I can ask you. You've been busy with taxes, but can I ask you that one? Does the I consciousness think that phenomena are inherently existent?
Wouldn't it be the mental consciousness?
Yeah, it's a mental consciousness. I consciousness phenomena appear to the I consciousness as inherently existent, but the I consciousness does not grasp them as that way. The example I often give is like the surveillance camera that just sees the scene, and the little guy or gal in the basement who's watching the monitors, they're the ones that make the decision about whether that's inherently existent intruder or whatever. So without making contact with the thing imputed, what's the thing imputed here that means usually when we talk about conventional reality, we say that phenomena are merely imputed, right? Here, the imputation or the designation is being done in a negative way. We're designating or imputing that something is inherently existent. Without making contact with the thing imputed, or as Jimpa says, without touching the imputed entity, what's imputed? Does that mean the mental image, or does that mean that, let's say, the idea of true existence?
That would be the idea of true existence is being imputed. That's the imputed.
Okay, let's see. Without making contact with the thing imputed, and adds by the mind, that is true existence. So she's saying, in accordance with what John's thinking, that the thing imputed is true existence, the thing that you're imagining to exist. Without making contact with that, without touching that. Okay, how can you touch that if it doesn't exist? You have to think about it. Without making contact with that thing, the non-existence of that thing is not apprehended. So here, there are two things that are going on. There are two things that are happening. There is the imputation by your mind, the grasping, the assent to the appearance of true existence. I think that's what is being referred to here as the thing imputed. Your mind is imputing upon my trees out my window or my altar room here, imputing upon it an existence that is appearing as it's assenting that appearance, assenting to that appearance, believing in that appearance, that is grasping to it. And that's the main problem. In Steve Batchelor's translation of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, maybe some of you have. Did I bring that up there? I didn't bring that up. He translates this, the verse right before this is supposedly an argument by the Samkhyas, the Samkhya school of philosophy, right? That verse 138 says, if according to you, Madhyamakas, it doesn't say Madhyamaka in the text, but that's the context is, according to you, even valid cognitions are not valid. Samkhya is trying to say this to the Prasangika, to the Madhyamakas. what does that mean? They're saying that because the Madhyamaka in general is saying that all phenomena, all conventional phenomena are not truly existent. They're false. So valid cognitions, the Samkhya is trying to say, valid cognitions are not valid because they're false also, right? Because they're conventional phenomena. If according to you, Madhyamikas, even valid cognitions are not valid, i.e., they are deceived, right, with respect to true existence, wouldn't the emptiness they understand, the valid cognitions understand, wouldn't that also be false? It must be. They're forcing. Therefore, meditation upon the ultimate truth of emptiness is surely incorrect. That's kind of the context of that. So the response, Shantideva's response, he's having this give and take with these theoretical objections by the different tenets, right? Those of you who are studying Bodhisattva Avatara know this, even in some of the earlier chapters, but particularly in the chapter on emptiness. So verse 139 in the Tibetan, as I said, it's verse 140 in the Sanskrit. Here is 139. The answer Shantideva gives. Without contacting, i.e., apprehending, the true existence which the mind has imputed. So Steve Batchelor is adding commentary from, I think it was Muchu Dharma Bhadra's commentary that Geshe's Gendarge, Geshe Nawandarge and Dharmasala, when he was teaching Bodhisattva Charyavatara, he was advised by the Dalai Lama to use, I think it was Muchu Dharma Bhadra's commentary, not the most sophisticated one, but was some that was more accessible. And so parsing in the commentary from that to explain the root verse, which is just like, without making contact with the thing imputed, the non-existence of that thing is not apprehended. Now he's adding in words, sort of commentary. Without contacting, that is, without apprehending, that's the sense of contacting or touching here. Without apprehending the true existence, let's say, you might say, understanding, theoretically understanding the true existence which the mind has imputed, one will not apprehend its non-true existence. One won't be able to understand its emptiness. And then the commentary goes on to say, in the same way, without having thought of the son of a barren woman, one cannot consider his death. What do you have here, Richard? Without...
I'm just posting the Batchelor translation.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's what I've been reading here, right? Right. Okay, good. Excellent.
Right.
That's good that you can see that on the screen. So he says, in the same way, without having thought of the son of a barren woman, one cannot consider his death. His death means the son of the barren woman, right? So does the son of does a barren woman have a son? You can try to do some semantics. Maybe she adopted someone, or she had surrogate sons. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about just good old straight. A barren woman doesn't have a son, so you can't be contemplating his death and feeling sorrow out of empathy for him because he doesn't exist, right? Where is it? In the same way, without having thought of the son of a barren woman, one cannot consider his death. In order to think about his death, you have to think about the theoretical son of a barren woman. And because non-true existence is dependent on true existence, the non-true existence that is the negation of false existence. What is non-true existence? Non-true existence means emptiness, right? The emptiness that is a negation of false existence. Emptiness is a negative, right? It's a non-affirming negative. It says that the so-called inherent existence or true existence does not exist. And because non-true existence is dependent on true existence, the non-true existence that is the negation of false existence also is clearly false. In other words, it has no true existence, no independent existence, no inherent existence. Nevertheless, it is quite valid to meditate on emptiness because it is the remedy that eliminates the apprehension of true existence. I'll just read one more thing here from the next stanza. For example, when his child dies in a dream, or when a person's child dies in a dream, I don't have any children, but I might dream of that. The dreamer's thought of the child's non-existence causes the thought of the child's existence to cease. But although the thought of his non-existence is false, it still has the ability to abandon the thought of his existence. Okay, so this is the context. Lama Tsong Khapa only quoted this. This stanza has 4 lines. Lama Tsong Khapa only quoted 2 of them. This is a very famous thing. And it is in debate. I mentioned in our last class, there are people who say that this is the way that Lama Tsong Khapa interprets this verse is incorrect. Some Khargyu and Sakya Lamas and so forth, whereas others agree that Lama Tsong Khapa has said that. Generally, in the Sanskrit of this and the Sanskrit commentaries of Bodhisattva Charyavatara, there were several. John or Paul, do you know how many Sanskrit commentaries there were to Bodhisattva Charyavatara?
I think there's like close to a dozen almost, or something like that.
Unlike Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka, at the time of, right after Chandrakirti, there were no commentaries. It was only later that Jayananda wrote the only Sanskrit commentary. Bodhisattva Charyavatara had many commentaries to it. Some of them are very renowned and relied on by the Tibetans. But those Sanskrit commentaries seem to interpret it in a different way than Lama Tsong Khapa is interpreting it. So some of the Sakya scholars and so forth and others said, oh, Lama Tsong Khapa is sort of like being too ingenious, trying to have this special meaning here that wasn't in the Sanskrit. Even the Sanskrit commentators didn't say it was this way. But that's for you to decide. So I will put up later a section from a text by Paul Williams. He wrote a paper that was in some obscure journal that no one was ever able to get. But finally it was published he published a book that had several of his papers, and this one is called Identifying the Object of Negation. I'll put up a PDF of part of that chapter. It says, Identifying the Object of Negation, Bodhisattva Charyavatara 9:140. That means chapter 9, the wisdom chapter, verse 140 in the Sanskrit. Then in parentheses, it says Tib 139. That means, which is equivalent to the Tibetan verse 139 that we're saying. So this, in the Tibetan text, this is verse 139, and in the Sanskrit 140. So he gives a long commentary about that. I didn't want to put it up beforehand for fear of you misinterpreting that I was saying he had the right idea here. I'm putting it up so that you will be aware in the future. You can read this now with your wisdom, with the background that you have from our more than a year of study of Madhyamaka, maybe some years of other courses you've taken. You'll be able to read that now and discern some kind of subtle meanings there. I'm hoping that you'll do that. William, what are you thinking?
I was thinking maybe knowing the answer ahead of time. In other words, that inherent existence or the child of a barren woman is a non-existent may influence how you approach trying to use that as an object of meditation. And what I mean by that is, he says, with the son of a barren woman, you couldn't imagine the barren woman's death. I mean, the child of the barren woman's death, if you didn't believe in the child of the barren woman.
Right. So you somehow apprehended. Sorry, go on.
In the same way, it seems to me that inherent existence, since it is so fundamental to the entire philosophy, that inherent existence is not something where you can simply say, I assent to the appearance of inherent existence, but rather I believe with all my heart and soul and intellect and everything about me, and have forever and ever, in the inherent existence of things. And therefore, it's not simply a matter of saying, well, I know the answer, it's a non-existent, therefore, when I see something, I don't, it's easy for me to realize that it's not inherently existent. It's not easy in part, I would say, because we don't believe in the son of the barren woman, and we don't believe in inherent existence. But inherent existence is so pervasive that the realization that in the end is a non-existent is like a bomb going off.
Yeah, you're right. So it's not as though inherent existence is pervasive, because inherent existence doesn't exist, but the appearance of inherent existence is pervasive, and our belief or grasping or assent to that appearance is pervasive. So yes, I agree. Snehi, what do you think?
I just was looking for clarification, Venerable George, when you were talking about, Lama Tsongkhapa's interpretation of some of the verses. Was that from Bodhicharya Avtara, or were you referring to Mula Madhyamaka Karika, like his interpretation of which text?
No, this is this verse from Bodhisattva Charyavatara.
Oh, okay.
In Jimba's text, it says here, guide to the Bodhisattva way states, without touching upon the imputed entity, the absence of its reality cannot be grasped. That's the verse that we've been talking about.
That's the one you're saying Lama Tsongkhapa interprets it in a way that that is not in the original Sanskrit?
Well, it's debate. Okay. So there may have been different Sanskrit editions. The Sanskrit that the commentators, the Indian commentators to Bodhisattva Charyavatara, the text that they were quoting, if you were to translate it into Tibetan, it wouldn't come out exactly like this. And that will, so if you get a chance, if you're interested in that, when I post this partial PDF, I don't know if I'll put the whole chapter up there, maybe Paul's paper. Paul Williams is an old friend. He was, I think he's still at Oxford, right? Does anyone here know Paul Williams?
Isn't he the one who converted to Catholicism afterwards?
Yes. So when I was at Manjushri Institute, Tupten Pende, Nawang Kedu, a couple of other of the monks, Sanghi Kondo and I, we went over to a local university, a very well-known university. The name is escaping me at the moment.
Bristol?
No, it was up near Institute of Lama, near Manjushri Institute. In fact, Steve Collier, Venerable Steve, was a student there at the time. And Paul Williams had been invited to give a talk on Buddhism. So we wanted to go, we monks and nuns, we wanted to go to see what a so-called scholar was talking about. So he turned out to be our contemporary. He wasn't like an old professor, he was our age. And he gave a very philosophical discussion about this. And afterwards, there were questions and answers, and we asked him questions about salam, about the stages and paths, and different things related to his paper, and he couldn't quite answer them very well. Anyway, we got together. I visited him at Oxford a couple of times. I met his family and his kids. Later, I met him when he was translating for the Geshe of the Lan Rim Center in Wales. And so I knew him quite well. And then I was quite shocked later, as Snehi is mentioned, that he gave up Buddhism and became a Roman Catholic. And so his criticisms of Buddhism always have to be taken with a grain of salt. Has a certain agenda. Well, we all have our own agenda, I suppose. So it's the Indian commentators, the Sanskrit that they have, if you were to translate it into Tibetan, doesn't look exactly the same for this verse as the Tibetan. And Lama Tsongkhapa's interpretation of this verse, from that point of view, if you look at the Sanskrit and the commentators, how they interpreted this verse, it's not talking about identifying the object of negation in order to realize emptiness. As I mentioned before in the last class, there is a stream of thought that you don't need to analyze emptiness. You don't need to find the object of negation in order to realize emptiness. In fact, that for some, that's even counterproductive, that you just meditate, like Hashan, just having no thought at all. Eventually, you will come in contact with emptiness. Kamalashila, who wrote the stages of meditation, the Bhavana Krama, that the Dalai Lama teaches so many times, and who we will quote a little bit later on. Kamalashila was talking about the need to progress sequentially. There's not an instantaneous kind of realization that comes about simply by having no thought and so forth. So that's kind of the context of what we're talking about here. So let's go a little bit further here. Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary here. So without touching upon the imputed entity, the absence of its reality cannot be grasped. So what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying is it's important to recognize the object that you're looking to dispute. You're looking to refute true existence. You have to understand how it would exist if it existed, and you have to understand how the mind is believing, assenting, or grasping to that appearance. Otherwise, you won't be able to eliminate them. Prajna Karamati. Let's see, what does Paul say? Oh, thank you, Paul. Well,
for those of you who feel like going into the Sanskrit.
Thank you. Thank you. There's the Sanskrit of that. So that's Prajna Karamati. Prajna Karamati, yeah, Karamati's commentary. So Lama Tsongkhapa continues now after just quoting this verse. Thus, if the imputed entity, namely the generic concept of what is to be negated, the generic concept of what is to be negated. So Anne says there, if the thing imputed, what did Jimpa say? The imputed entity. If the thing imputed, and she paraphrases that by the generality or image of the object of negation. It's a little bit different from what Jimpa is saying. Jimpa seems to be saying the imputed thing, the inherent existence. She's talking about, when she's saying generality, she's taking it as dunshi, not just chi, which means generality, not just the general inherent existence, but the meaning generality, that means the mental image of that. And she's going by this, the one Geshe's commentaries, I think. If the thing imputed, the generality or image of the object of negation, does not appear to the mind well, it is impossible to apprehend well the non-existence of the object of negation. Are we following? How are we doing? John, are you following? So in one sense, we're saying, we're knowing or believing in, or having an apprehension of inherent existence. I'm not talking about emptiness now. We're just talking about the way things appear generally to us. We have within our mental consciousness and a mental image of that inherent existence. Let's say the inherent existent I, inherently existent I, or the inherently existent chariot, or whatever. Anne is reading it that way. And I think that's generally how this is understood. Thus, if Jimpa says, thus, if the imputed entity, namely the generic concept of what is to be negated, or you could say the mental image, if that does not appear clearly to one's mind, it is said that one will not be able to pinpoint the absence of that object of negation. Pinpointed. The Tibetan, gacha de mepa, lekpar zimpa minupa. One will not be able to apprehend well its not existence, is the Tibetan. And Jimpa's putting some sort of, making it a little more tasty, I guess. One will not be able to pinpoint the absence of that object of negation. So you have to first recognize it, which we're talking about in our course on meditation on emptiness. You have to be able to recognize the object of negation, that mental image. Okay. Therefore, Jimpa continues from Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, if a clear sense of what is the purported true existence. So I'm glad he put in here purported. So true existence doesn't exist, but it is purported or assumed or believed or grasped to exist, right? And says, therefore, unless true establishment, or true existence, which is what does not exist. Okay. So Jimpa says, therefore, if a clear sense of what is the purported true existence, that which is said not to exist, as well, unless there's a clear sense of that, as well as what phenomena are understood to be empty of. So the Tibetan here becomes a little unclear what Lama Tsongkhapa is talking about, whether he's talking about that as being the grasping, whether you're saying whether the mental image is not clear and whether the grasping to that is not clear. Not quite sure. Therefore, if a clear sense of what is the purported true existence, that which is said not to exist, as well as what phenomena are understood to be empty of, the object to be negated, because the purported true existence is the object to be negated. So it's unclear how Jimpa is translating this. If they do not arise to the mind, there seems like two things. It would be impossible to ascertain clearly the nature of the absence of true existence as well as the nature of emptiness. And translates that this way. Therefore, unless true establishment, which is usually what we translate as true existence, unless true existence, which is what does not exist, and the aspect of the object of negation, which is that of which phenomena are empty, do not appear just as they are as objects of the mind, good ascertainment of the lack of true existence and the entity of emptiness cannot occur. So what I'm understanding that to mean is that here it's not talking about the grasping so much. It's talking about what would, if you don't understand well what emptiness, what inherent existence would be if it did exist, that's one thing. And if you don't understand if it doesn't appear well, the appearance of that, the object that you're going to negate, the appearance of true existence through which you're understanding or believing in this inherent existence, if they don't appear to the object well, good ascertainment of the lack of true existence or true establishment and the entity of emptiness cannot occur. You won't understand well what emptiness means either. I'm going to give Richard first choice here, like at a news conference, because William had one question before, but we'll get to William second.
Thank you, Venerable George. I just have this question about what is the difference between what Anne Klein says is the lack of true establishment and the entity of emptiness. Why is there a distinction made between the two? Because they sound like synonyms to me. Yeah. As does the way Thupten Jinpa translates it as well.
Right. So yeah, this particular
What's
phrase,
the distinction between these two concepts?
Right.
You know.
Later on, it comes a little more clearly. We're always talking about two things: the appearance, the mental image, and the grasping to that. But here it seems to be talking about something else. First of all, if you don't understand what the purported true existence or inherent existence is, what would it be like if it did exist? Say, for instance, if things were truly existent, if they existed the way they appear to our senses, what would be the result? What would be the consequences of that? Well, they wouldn't be able to change. If something existed, it could never go out of existence. It would exist the way that it appears right now, as not dependent on anything else, on causes and conditions or imputing mind and so forth. That's kind of like understanding the entity of the let's see, unless true establishment, which is what does not exist, does not appear. I'm taking the verb from the end of the sentence. So if the true establishment does not appear well, and the aspect of the object of negation, which is that of which phenomena are empty, when it's talking about the aspect, that seems to be talking about the mental image. So it seems to be talking about two things. So those of you who are, deep students, deeper than I, better understanding, you can ponder that a bit. William, what do you think? What's your thought?
I'm reminded of the example of the coiled rope and that you mistake for a snake.
Right.
In that moment, when you mistake the coiled rope for a snake, it's not that you have a mental image of a snake, but in your body, your whole emotional reaction, everything within you is afraid that the snake is going to bite you and that you are going to die. I think to eliminate that aspect of the grasping at true existence of things and to reduce it to a mental phenomenon is, and that's where this Mahayana fellow can come back in. I think that is not all there is. In other words, the realization that the snake is empty, whether the rope coiled snake or the actual snake, but the rope coiled snake, you see, it's clear this snake is not going to bite you, it's not going to kill you, it's not going to poison you, it's not going to end your existence. All of the fears and emotions, if that's not part of the realization of an object that's inherently existent, it seems to me then you're missing a good part of what it is. It's not simply a mental idea.
The example of the snake will come a little bit later in a different context. So that's usually not what's mentioned right here. So the idea, say for instance, although it's a coiled rope in the corner in the dark, let's say, of your shed, like I have a shed outside my cabin here that I don't go in very often. I know there is a black snake that's in there. If I see a coil of garden hose in the shadows, I can kind of be worried that might be the snake, right? I'm imputing upon something which does not have any snakeness, snake. But that's a little bit different context. We'll get to that a little bit later. Sean, what do you think?
I was wanting to ask for an example of what a appearance of inherent existence that isn't clear would be.
Well, say for instance, when you're just getting angry, if someone's talking to you and you think they're talking to me, right? There's a sense of me in your mental consciousness. I always put my hand down to the heart chakra, but in your mental consciousness, there's a sense of me that is, if one were to investigate, look at it clearly, there's a sense of me that appears to be existing from its own side, but we don't usually analyze that. We don't generally recognize the object of negation here. One of the objects of negation is the mental image, the appearance to the consciousness of inherent existence. That appearance does exist, right? But it is the appearance of that true existence will be eliminated eventually. So it is called an object of negation. The other object of negation is what is implied by that image, sort of like what's on the other side, like the example of the what's that called? You know, I saw it in some movie the other day. Someone was using that kind of example about some, seeing the Eiffel Tower or the Pentagon or something through some two little images that you're looking through those images and it's as though the Eiffel Tower or the Pentagon is out there. That's the actual, in this case, the inherent existence that we're assuming or believing to exist by means of this mental image. That's the main object of negation. You want to disprove that, And by disproving that what appears to exist there doesn't exist, then to cause the grasping to it to dissipate. You say, oh, it doesn't exist. It's just, it's just an appearance, like a mirage or like an illusion or something like that. Stephen, what are your thoughts?
Thanks, Venerable George. So, yeah, but when we talk about an appearance of truly existing or inherent existence, what we're really talking about is some basis appearing that way. So me, my identity or your identity. And in that sense, we're not trying to completely refute myself or yourself as having an identity, just merely that it lacks inherent existence.
Right. But that's the only way that it appears to us right now, as inherently existent. So how you appear to yourself, or how the vase appears to you outside, the different kinds of appearances. The appearance to your sense consciousness, the appearance to your mental consciousness. So when you think about the vase, or you think about yourself, there is an appearance of yourself to your mental consciousness. We say a meaning generality, a mental image, which is a combination of the conventionally existent self and an inherently existent self superimposed on it, which you cannot extricate.
Right. There's a mixing or an amalgam of those two. But still, I mean, it's valid for me. I exist. I can check that.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, to me, it's when I say amalgam, it's almost like there's a quality to my perception of myself, my identity, that is inherently existent, but that's not the whole thing that's there. But you're saying that really that they're inseparable, and that I have to, get rid of everything?
Until you have become Buddha, you can't extricate the appearance of conventionally existent phenomena and their superimposed appearance of true existence or inherent existence. They are mixed. The only time, so you have to throw out the whole. You have to throw out you might say you have to throw out the baby with the bathwater here. The major thing that you're refuting is the appearance of inherent existence. You want to get rid of, so to do that, you have to get rid of both of them. So inadvertently, you're throwing out the baby, right? The conventionally existent self, and you realize emptiness. But your main purpose in doing so was not to refute the conventional existence, because it was not the dominant thing in your mind that's causing the grasping to inherent existence. It's the appearance of inherent existence through which, let's say maybe like the conventionally existent self that's amalgamized there or unified with that inseparably. That's almost like transparent. You're not seeing that. You're just seeing the appearance of inherent existence, and as a result of that, grasping at inherent existence. So you want to be able to refute the inherent existence, and in so doing, the major component, the appearance to your mind of that inherent existence, will disappear. And at that moment, you have an experience of emptiness, of shunyata, that what was previously appearing to your mind doesn't really exist. Like, say, for instance, you thought someone, when you were a kid, you had a girl you had a crush on, or if you were a girl, you had a boy that you had a crush on, and you thought, oh, they don't like me. That you're completely convinced they don't like you. And then one day in the cafeteria or someplace in the library, you hear them talking They can't see you. You're behind a screen or behind a bush or a potted plant, and you hear them say, "Oh, I really like Stephen," or "I really like George," or something. And then at that moment, the what was previously conceived to be someone who didn't like you, that goes vacuous. That becomes non-existent, because you're now, you have some evidence that they like you. Is this example making sense?
It is. Thank you, Venerable George. I'm just trying to get there with you, thinking, and maybe this comes back to William's comment about the snake. It's just like so ingrained and so incorporated into our perceptions, true existence, that, yeah, we have to get rid of everything to, get that deep so that we don't react that way, to the example that William
It's
gave.
not that you have to get rid of it, because when you arise from that meditative equipoise, or when you arise from your realization that she does like you, or that he does like you, or something like that, you see them again, and you no longer are believing that they don't like you. Or in this case, you're seeing the phenomena again, and having realized that they're empty of inherent existence, although they appear that way, you don't believe in that appearance any longer. You have that post-meditation, illusion-like meditation on emptiness, that it's like an illusion. Oh, they look like that, but they're not really that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go a little bit further here. So, what was the last sentence here? Long sentences. Therefore, if a clear sense of what is the purported true existence, that which is said not to exist. So if you don't have a good sense of what true existence is supposed to be, as well as what phenomena are understood to be empty of, the object to be negated, if they do not arise to one's mind, it would be impossible to ascertain clearly the nature of the absence of true existence, as well as the nature of emptiness. Okay, so the statement, this is a very common statement based on this, not just only that one phrase from Bodhisattva Charyavatara, but many other places, that you have to realize the object of negation clearly. You have to recognize it or identify it. Without doing so, you won't be able to understand emptiness. It is not enough to have identified true existence as postulated by proponents of philosophical tenets. The word postulated here that he's translated is teldu kuntakpa. Telba can mean adventitious, but it also means superficial. So Anne translates it as superficially imputed. It is not enough to have identified existence as superficially imputed or postulated by proponents of philosophical tenets or their corresponding apprehensions of true existence. It is most essential, therefore, to have identified well the innate grasping at true existence. Innate grasping at true existence, not that which is intellectually formed or postulated or, what does she say, superficially imputed by other tenets, or things that it could be that you've just thought this way also, by listening to talk radio or something, that things really exist in these ways. It is most essential, therefore, to have identified well the innate grasping at true existence, which has persisted from beginningless time and is present both in those whose minds are affected or tempered by philosophical tenets, you're influenced by tenets. It still exists. It's not as though the innate grasping doesn't exist if you have the intellectually formed grasping, but it's still there, which persists since beginningless time and is present both in those whose minds are tempered by philosophical tenets and those whose minds are not thus tempered or affected, as well as the purported true existence grasped at by such an innate mind. So here's now it's talking about two things. Now it's clear it's talking about two things. One is the grasping, and one is the thing that's being grasped at. Earlier is not so clear what was being talked about. Whether that's still, at that point, it was talking about these two, but clear now that he's saying it's most essential, therefore, or as Anne says, see, I forget what did she say here? Superficially imputed on page 165. So
second to the last paragraph, I think, Honorable George.
Because of this, it is very important. It is a very important essential, this is reading Anne on page 165, to identify well the innate conception of true existence that has operated beginninglessly and exists in both those whose awareness have been affected through study of philosophical tenets and in those whose awareness have not been affected in that way. So that's talking about the innate conception of true existence, innate grasping. That's the subjective side, that you're believing in this, as well as, and to identify the true existence that is conceived by that mind. I'm not talking about the mental image. That's talking about what you believe as a result of that mental image, what you believe to exist out there. The mental image is there right now, which is appearing, the mental image of inherent existence is appearing there. Did someone have a question? They're just... No.
I think John had a question, but he put his hand down.
Yeah.
John, yeah.
Is it, we've been saying the appearance of inherent existence, should we also, or do we want to distinguish between that and appearance as inherently existent? Are we actually having an experience of the appearance and grasping at inherent existence, or is it that things are appearing as inherently existent?
Well, things do appear to our senses as inherently existent. They appear to our mental consciousness as inherently existent. Also, say, for instance, in the path of preparation, when you have intellectually formed realization of emptiness, even if you have a union of tranquil abiding and penetrative insight, shamatha vipassana, on the highest level of the path of preparation, you're in meditative equipoise, realizing emptiness by means of a mental image. That mental image still appears to your mental consciousness as inherently existent. So outside things appear to you as inherently existent, as truly existent. And inside things, if you're not meditating, if you're not having a direct realization of emptiness, even your conceptual minds, even the mental images appear to be inherently existent. Okay? Does that help?
Yeah, and maybe this is incorrect, but I'm thinking that because things consistently appear both to sense and mental consciousness as inherently existence, then there is a concession to things being inherently existent.
Exactly.
So this is semantically different, but
so concession. William wanted to press belief. We say assent. Grasping, they're all getting to the same thing. So concession is good. I like that. Assent. So I used before, we assent to that appearance. That means we just, it's there, so we believe it. We what was the word you just used? Started with C?
Concession.
Concession. I was going to say we concess.
We concede.
Concede. Yeah.
Yeah,
We concede. Yeah. We concede. Yeah. I concede. I assent. So, yeah, that's been ingrained in us since beginningless time.
Right.
And very difficult. The Buddha was the only founder of a religion that we know of, previous universes, maybe other people, that explained this very subtle fact that what we have been conceding, believing, assenting to, grasping to since beginningless time doesn't really exist. And that should be a real, like that emoji, the brain blowing out when you realize, whoa, there's never been an agent. I was never an agent of negative actions. I was never the experiencer of the results of those actions, like the quotation I gave from earlier, right? That can be a mind-blowing experience. And once you realize that, once you've got familiar with that, then the afflictions that depend upon that concession, that belief, that assent, that grasping, all of those afflictions will be tempered, eventually, some of them will be abandoned when you have direct realization, then slowly more abandoned, more until you get to the eighth bhumi. They don't go away immediately, but certainly your anger in the desire realm will be greatly affected when you reach the path of seeing, or even on the path of preparation. All of these afflictions of the desire realm that we now experience will be suppressed, not just by the like when we talk about suppressing, when you have a union of tranquil abiding and penetrative insight, meditating on the first form absorption, the desire realm delusions are suppressed. They're not manifest. Here, they're suppressed in a deeper way because you have an insight, and intellectually on the path of preparation, you have an intellectual understanding, realization of emptiness. So they don't manifest as vigorously as before you had this realization of emptiness. So something to look forward to. Oh man, wouldn't that be relief? Wouldn't that be shanti? Wouldn't that be peaceful? Wouldn't that be great? Mikhail, what do you think?
Yeah, just to be sure, we are distinguishing true existence on one side, which does not exist, and on the other side, grasping at true existence.
Which does
exist. But that grasping at true existence actually is a mind.
That's right.
Okay, right. Understood.
It's a consciousness, right? Right. Grasping is a consciousness. And it's mediated by that mental image of the appearance of true existence or inherent existence. Okay, so let's go a little bit further. So we just read, it is most essential, therefore, to have identified well the innate grasping at true existence, which persists since beginningless time, which has persisted since beginningless time and is present both in those whose minds are intellectual, whose minds are affected by philosophical tenets, and those whose minds are not affected in that way, as well as the purported true existence. We have to have identified well also the purported true existence grasped at by such a mind. Okay, you have to identify the grasping and to identify the purported thing, the theoretical, hypothetical true existence that it's grasping at. Okay, clear, right? Ida, what do you think?
my space bar doesn't work.
Oh.
May I ask you, Venerable?
Yeah.
Have you had an experience of emptiness?
No, the only emptiness that I've realized is when my mug is empty of coffee, but that's not emptiness. That's just empty, right? The Dalai Lama has said recently, it sort of changes. Earlier in his life, he said if he could have develop bodhicitta, that would be fantastic. Recently, in recent years, he's been saying if he could reach the what does he say? The path of preparation. That would be a great.
I think it depends on the teachings. Sometimes the path of preparation, and sometimes he says, "I'm hoping to reach the path of seeing."
Yeah, well, it's hoping to reach the path of seeing, because although generally in the sutra path, having achieved the path of preparation, it's going to be a long, long time before you achieve the path of seeing. But through the practice of Tantra, once you've had a realization, an intellectual realization of emptiness on the path of, with combination of Shine and Lactone, right? On the path of preparation. In Tantra, it's possible in that very life to realize the path of seeing through the tantric methods, through the subtlemost mind. So maybe that's kind of implied there. One of the things I've been meaning to mention over time is that Lama Tsongkhapa mentioned several times that through his study of Tantra, it enhanced his understanding of the sutra path. There were certain difficult points in sutra, when I say, what we're studying now, for instance, that difficult to understand, but through something similar in the Tantra path, it's sort of like there was like an aha moment or something. Oh, can be understood that way, and vice versa. Certain points in Tantra that are difficult, just if you were to have just studied the Tantra system, become more clear understanding the Sutra system. So when we talk about the aspirational prayers, like in the 6th session yoga, that John can recite to you in Tibetan, if I were to prompt him. But anyway, the final prayers is Gedi dusum deshek secheki semon drup dang damchir sinchungo choksum jinlab tendo milu tu lekbon drupni. So one dedicates one's vows to upholding the holy Dharma and to fulfill the deeds of the Bodhisattvas, and to be able to, what do we say? Teksum bude shidu. Teksu means the 3 vehicles. Bude shi means the 4 tantric sets. Lexum, upholding them well, may I be able to benefit sentient beings through skillful means. So we need to know the sutra path. We need to know the Tantra path, and upholding them well, understanding them well, putting them in the practice. One uses the skillful means that one derives from that understanding to benefit sentient beings. William, what do you think?
Very, very briefly, I just wanted to read the last sentence where you ceased. It says, this is in the Anne Klein, page 165. For if you have not identified this, even if you refute an object of negation through reasoning, the adherence to true existence that has operated beginninglessly is not harmed at all. Therefore, the meaning at this point would be lost. So
thank you for
I think that kind of sums it up.
Yeah. So Jimba says here, as well as the purported true existence, without identifying these, one might engage in eliminating the object of negation, refuting it through reasoning, but this would not undermine whatsoever the clinging to true existence that has persisted since beginningless time, and thus would miss the entire purpose at hand. That's how Jimpa takes that. So the example that's given often of shooting arrows, unless you know the target, unless you've identified well the target, you can be shooting arrows or shooting your rifle or whatever you're shooting, and it won't damage that which you want to damage, right? If you want to I don't know, hopefully you don't want to kill the bird, but you want to scare it away. So unless you can identify the branch that you can hit near it with your BB to scare it away, it's not going to be any purpose. So unless you can identify well the object of negation, so simply without doing meditation, without inwardly identifying in your mind the object of negation, the mental image, how the mental image seems to appear, that means that what's being inferred by that, what your mind conceives by that mental image, that is the nature of true existence, how it would be. And unless you can identify also in that same meditation the mind that's grasping to it, which is true grasping, dagzin. Or if in the case of the person, let's say Jigsoklatawa, the view of the transitory collection that's viewing the conventionally existent person as inherently existent by means of that mental image, unless you can identify those, simply refuting with lots of reasonings is not going to affect your mind until you've recognized those, so you can see, that thing that I thought doesn't exist. The thing that's appearing so clearly to your mind, and in that same meditation session, when all of the logics come together, all the logical reasonings come together, the stages of reasoning, the subject, the predicate, the reasoning, the example, and so forth. At that point, it doesn't exist. So at that point, when the thing that was appearing to your mind, the appearance of inherent existence, a mental image, when that disappears, that vacuity is the experience of emptiness. And you wouldn't, like it says, you would miss the entire purpose of getting rid of that if you didn't identify well the object of negation and in your mind and so forth. Okay. So maybe we stop there. So this next sentence will start next time. Let me just sort of prime the pump. Now, to do this, we must first identify the grasping at true existence that lies within our own mind. This is subjective, and understand how the various Madhyamaka reasonings function directly and indirectly to eradicate its object. Its object, the grasping's object, eradicate its object means eradicate the belief in the existence of inherent existence. Negation and affirmation that are directed solely outward will have scant benefit, or as Anne Klein translated, furthermore, having initially identified the conception of inherent existence, the grasping of it, in your own mental continuum, have identified or recognized. In Tibetan, we say ngozimpa. Sometimes recognize works because the grasping does exist. When you say recognizing inherent existence, it's hard to say recognize that. You can identify that. So the same word ngozimpa, maybe in one case you have to translate it as identified, in one case at least, maybe both cases you can use identify. She says, furthermore, having initially identified the conception of inherent existence in your own mental continuum, you should know how the reasonings serve to disprove the object of that conception directly and indirectly. For the refutation and proof of one who is only directed outside is of very little benefit. Okay, that's where we'll use that as a starting point next time. Snehi, what do you think?
Thank you, Venerable George. So I was wondering, when we do the analysis of like the sevenfold chariot thing and the diamond slivers and so forth, the whole purpose of that is to prove that the object of negation, inherent existence, cannot exist. Like it would be incoherent, right? So I'm wondering, is what we're reading saying that analysis, doing that alone is insufficient to thoroughly refute the object of negation?
Well, to have a realization of it, that's not sufficient. You can scholarly read these things and say, oh yeah, that makes sense, but it never really touches your mind, never really touches the grasping. So if you were to have reached certainty about those reasonings, and then you were to go into meditation and try to recognize what's happening, that there's an appearance of inherent existence, and your mind is believing it, is, what was it? I want to say conceiving, like concession. What's the word?
Concession.
Yeah, no, but
John's word, concession.
Concede. I'm conceding that that's true. I'm believing that's true. I'm grasping that's true. If you recognize that, and then you apply the reasonings at that point that show that the object that you've been believing in doesn't exist, slowly that belief in it will begin to dissipate, because you know it's not true. This is like the example I give so many times of William walking down the stairs as dressed as Santa Claus. When you were 3 years old, you completely believed it. When you got to 4 or 5, maybe you noticed that Santa Claus walked the same way as Uncle Bill did or something like that. Your belief became, later you saw him getting dressed or something, you knew it wasn't Santa Claus. So it's a cumulative process. Okay. William, you'll forever be known as Santa Claus in our Madhyamaka class.
And
I thought the same thing about a monk coming down in robes. You
Right.
could say the same thing.
Right, you could. Yeah, right. So anyone have a last thought before we finish? Oh, Mikhail, good.
Yeah, thank you. Just about the last sentence, what is directed outside? What does that mean, outside? Thupten Chita says outward.
Solely outward, right? So in the Tibetan, this is Kachir Tawa. Ka usually means face, chir means, well, chir means many things, but it usually can mean outward, outside. So that means facing outside. Kachir Tawa Shiki Daktrubni. So establishing or Gakdrup, establishing the refutation, which is a view focused outside, not focused at the appearance of inherent existence in your own continuum, in your own mental continuum. Inside means within your continuum, mental continuum. And instead of that, just focusing on the logical things on the pages of your book. I don't think it means focusing on the object to be negated in the tree outside your mental continuum. Even there, that's not what you have to refute. You have to refute the belief in that appearance of the tree as being inherent existence inside your own mental continuum. I think that's the meaning there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Thank you.
Okay. Everyone happy? Doris, are you okay? No. Oh, Ida.
I went back to the Dashibhumika to understand the samenesses of phenomena, the similes.
Right.
And well, I found something very interesting in paragraph 464. Well, the Dashibhumika
of the 84,000, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. After going through the samenesses of phenomena, then it goes to analyzing dependent origination. And after that, on this verse 1464, it says, in that way, through his examination of the 10 aspects of dependent origination, he examines
the 10 aspects.
Excuse me?
You said through his analysis of the
10 aspects of dependent origination, he examines no self, no being, no soul, no person, emptiness by nature, and the natural absence of doer and experiencer. And there arises the door to liberation, that is emptiness. Now, in all the texts that I've read, I never come across the word soul. Wow, is this a mistranslation? Is something missing there, or what is this referring to?
I don't know which word they translated. So the thing that I read to you at the beginning of the class, quote from the Sutra Samuccaya, reflects that so similarly. Kashyapya, if a person should be involved in such great misdeeds, these negative actions, in entering the Tathagata's Dharma teaching, involved with causes and conditions, says there is not any self, any sentient being, any living being, any person at all. So Kangsak is the Tibetan for usually we translate as person. When we talk about, what do we say? There's no self. Self is usually in Tibetan dak, which is in Sanskrit atma. So atma is often translated by the West as soul, right? Even in India, where people translate the Bhagavad Gita and other things, they say the soul, atma, the great soul. So all of these words are a little bit fluid. Generally, like sokpa, sok means someone which is a synonym of sentient being, is a living being, someone who is a person, someone who is a self, living being, sentient being, any person. So they're all kind of synonymous. So soul may have been a translation of what we generally say as self.
Well, it does say here, no self, no being, no soul.
Okay, so they're translating another one of these as soul. Okay, the whole list. Those are the usual ones. Usually here we say, here in the text it says dakam, semchenam, sogam, gangsak, gangyang, medo. There's none.
I think it's sok, Venerable George. I think it's the sok. I just looked at the Tibetan.
The sok? Huh.
Yeah.
So they're translating that as soul.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's usually that sok means living. Is a synonym of sentient being in the sense that we are living. We have a life force, sok. So interesting. And also the fact that you mentioned also there's no experiencer, no agent or experiencer, that also reflects this other quotation. There is no person at all who is an agent or experiencer regarding those negative actions.
And then the next one is a short one. Let me read that for you. 465. In the way he comes near to liberation, through the cessation of the nature of the components of existence, and there arises the door to liberation, that is featurelessness, which will be signlessness.
Probably.
I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. So good. Thank you for that. Also, with regard to those 10, I just wanted to finish off one thought. When we talked about the first two before, what the difference was, what was signless and characterlessness. Signlessness and characterlessness. Signlessness was pretty clear. Character in Geshe Zopa's commentary at that time, he seemed to differentiate those two. The signlessness was talking about the experience in meditative equipoise. And this was something that William had asked about before. William was suggesting that the characterlessness was talking about conventional reality. What Geshe Zopa said was that was more related to reasoning. So a little bit similar to here when we're talking about if you just have reasoning not directed inward without the experience, that doesn't lead to the desired effect. So let's leave it at that. Hope to see some of you on Monday, and I'll try to post some of these PDFs. I was weighing whether to post them before class, but I thought you might get confused. You may not want to read them, but you might. Snehi, would you like to put up the
Yes. Venerable George, would it be okay if you posted the whole PDF of Paul Williams' article?
I think so. Generally, when I was at my Tripa Institute, they would have photocopies of excerpts from books. I think there's some academic concession that if you give reference, you don't have to write to the publisher, but that you can,
so
for academic purpose. Go on.
We're just putting it on the password protected page, so it's not accessible to the whole public, only for our little class.
Right. That's what they did at my Tripa. I think that's okay. So I'll put that whole thing up.
Okay. Thank
it's
you.
I think it's about 16 pages or something like that, or a little bit longer than that. So yeah, you might find that interesting. And I'll also, the notes that come at the end of the book, I'll actually put that as a separate, so you can see what he's talking about when he says note number 142 or something like that.
Thank you so much. I'll share the prayers.
Okay. So the prayers, dedication prayers. Remembering that we've created some virtue. Maybe you got annoyed during class, created some, if you look back at it, some negative energy. But for the most part, due to the motivation at the beginning, created virtue. Due to these virtues, because Gewadi doesn't mention merits, due to these virtues, so that includes both merits and wisdom, due to these virtues, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that very state. May this supreme, precious bodhicitta that has not arisen, arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And our dear Guru Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious, conqueror Losang, that means Losang Drakpa, Lama Tsongkhapa, who is the spiritual father to his two sons, Kedrubje and Galsupje, together with your Gelugpa lineage, all objects of refuge in the infinite realms, please now bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. By holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. So you can think also when we talk about the Dharma patience of the unborn, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable and venerable Guru, to you I make this request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively well, let's say exclusively for both the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. At this I was despondent. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of the bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, the children of the conquerors, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. You gurus who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging as you do with skillful means moved by mercy, means love and compassion, all illuminating spiritual friends, please live a long and stable life. And then sealing these various dedications in the emptiness of the three spheres, the virtues, the goals dedicated to quick arrival of the reincarnation of Lama Zopa, for instance, and the act of dedication all appear to our conventional mind as inherently existent, but are actually devoid of inherent existence. Even being devoid of inherent existence, they still function. The law of cause and effect, causality, is infallible. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you Monday, and if not, next Saturday. Take care. Have a
Thank you,
good one.
Venerable George.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.